The U.S. has launched a tariff challenge with the World Trade Organization against Canada. It argues its own tariffs on steel and aluminum imports are justified, but the retaliation this country took on July 1st is not. Could the U.S. have a point? Joining me now in Toronto is international trade lawyer Mark Warner. Mark, do the Americans have a solid case against Canada at the World Trade Organization?
Well, they have a case. Solid is a difficult word to say. But what I would say is the American case against Canada seems to me to be a bit stronger than the Canadian case against the United States, and I'll tell you why. The reason is that the Americans have put these national security tariffs under Section 232 on steel and aluminum and threatened them on autos. And they intend to defend that as a national security measure. Now, this is a very expansive use of that national security power by President Trump. But every American president has taken the position that the GATT or the WTO panels can't second guess an American president's determination of national security. And I think everyone has known throughout the history of the WTO and the GATT before it that anyone who challenged that, if any panel were to challenge that, it would basically explode American participation in the WTO. On the other hand, countries like Canada who want to respond to a measure like that normally have to make a complaint to the WTO. It's got to go to a panel, maybe an appeal of a panel decision, and then a series of what they call compliance measures. And then, and only then, compensation might be authorized. We've kind of done this hybrid approach. We've complained to the WTO, but we've gone ahead and retaliated immediately. And that was always going to be a problem. And I think that that retaliation is really not on very solid grounds in terms of WTO rules. Now, obviously, I think the thinking is that it'll all be sorted out in the wash at some point. Parties will sit down and negotiate, but maybe not.
But if this drags on, and it's going to be very unpopular to say here in Canada, but by WTO rules, is Canada in the wrong here?
Not so much in the wrong, but I don't think normally you have to, if we're going to say that we're a small, medium-sized country and we defend the rules-based multilateral system, you kind of have to either do that or not. And in this case, we've chosen not to do that. We've chosen to act unilaterally. Now, I suppose the government will say, well, we're not acting unilaterally because Mexico and Europe and Turkey and all these other countries are also acting in a similar manner. But just in terms of what the WTO rules are, we're not following the letter of the law. And I think it's, as I said, I think that the American defense, just on the idea that everyone in the WTO system knows that a panel that were to rule against the United States' use of national security would pretty much shut the whole place down. As would a panel that would say that countries can willy-nilly decide to unilaterally retaliate when they want. In a weird kind of way, we're doing the bidding of Trump and his United States Trade Representative, Robert Lighthizer. We're doing their bidding for them, because they actually don't like the dispute settlement mechanism in the WTO, so they kind of win either way, because whichever outcome happens, the WTO dispute settlement system is weakened.
Now, does it matter that we've heard U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross make two arguments, that one, that Canada is not actually a national security threat, but this is a way to leverage at the NAFTA negotiating table, and two, it forces Canada to take action against China and other countries to take action against China. With Wilbur Ross putting that out in the open like there, does that play any factor in how this would go down at the WTO?
Well, it may well be. It'll be sort of some of the things that a panel will consider, all the different explanations that have been used by President Trump and by the Commerce Secretary Ross and all of that sort of thing. But again, the threshold question, I think, really would be, would a panel feel comfortable second-guessing that just the very exercise of that national security power? Because, as I said, every single American president has said that they wouldn't tolerate that. That's not a Trumpian motion. One of the things we've had since Trump came to the power is we in Canada tend to think everything about trade is about Trump. Some of the things he's doing, he's taking a very expansive definition of national security here. He's not really saying Canada is a national security threat. That's kind of a Canadian government talking point. He's saying that the United States has to have an industrial base, and that's why they have to have those manufacturing industries, which isn't quite the same thing, notwithstanding the government's talking points. Either way, I think the Americans will be quite upset if a panel were to rule against them on that.
And really quickly, I don't want to interrupt, but really quickly, we've got 20 seconds left. What could happen to the Canadian economy if the WTO finds that Canada is in the wrong?
Well, I think the Americans would get a chance to retaliate if we get to that stage against that, and that wouldn't look pretty. But I think before we even get to that, the very fact that we are fighting them in the WTO will probably increase the odds that we might see those auto tariffs, national security tariffs, that have been threatened.
And that is one place to leave it there. Thank you very much, Mark Warner. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.